A scarred German shepherd limped through the Colorado blizzard, an old brass room key clenched gently between her teeth. She stopped at the cabin of Owen Barrett, a lonely former Navy SEAL who had spent years keeping his fire alive and his heart locked away. But the dog was not asking to be saved. She was leading him to the abandoned Snowline Inn, where a trapped woman waited in the dark, and the maps of a dead mountain guide still held the safest roads through the storm. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing you more meaningful stories. Owen Barrett kept the fire alive because fire was honest. It asked for wood, air, and patience. It gave heat in return. No questions. No sympathy. No old photographs staring from shelves with the quiet accusation of happier years. Just flame, ember, ash, and the low iron groan of the stove whenever the wind pressed its shoulder against the cabin walls. At 47, Owen lived high above Silver Pass, Colorado, where the mountains rose like sleeping giants under their white blankets and the roads became rumors after dark. His cabin sat on a shelf of pine and stone, half hidden from the old service road, its windows small, its roof steep, its porch rails scarred by weather and time. Inside, everything had a place. The woodpile by the stove was stacked by size. The old radio sat beside a notebook filled with frequencies and storm notes. A metal toolbox, painted a faded green, rested beneath the workbench with every wrench and bit, set in order so precise it could have passed inspection in another life. That other life had once called him Lieutenant Barrett. Now the mountain called him only when something broke. Owen preferred it that way. Broken hinges, cracked pipes, dead batteries, split handles. Those were honest troubles. They did not ask why a man could survive war and still lose the habit of belonging. They did not ask why he had no wife, no children, no sister calling on holidays, no friend reckless enough to climb the pass just to share bad coffee. He was not hiding, he told himself. He was simply living where silence had room to stretch. The wind rose after sundown, rolling down from the high ridges with a bright, bitter fury. Snow came hard and sideways, not falling so much as charging. By 9, the world outside the cabin windows had become white motion and black trees, the kind of storm that made even strong houses remember they were made by human hands. Owen stood at the stove in his olive-drab combat shirt, the fitted body worn soft with use, the camouflage sleeves marked by dark horizontal bands around the upper arms. His face, clean-shaven and angular, caught the firelight in hard planes. Strong jaw, straight nose, cheekbones sharpened by weather. His undercut hair, brown gone silver at the top, was still neat despite the hour, as if discipline had followed him into solitude and refused to die there. He was tightening the handle on a dented kettle when he heard it. Not a knock, a scrape, 3 faint claws against wood. Owen went still. The cabin settled around him. The stove ticked. Wind threw snow against the door with both hands. For a moment he wondered if it had only been a branch dragged loose from the porch roof. Then it came again, weak, insistent. Owen crossed to the door without rushing. He took the flashlight from the peg, checked the small window beside the frame, and saw nothing but snow spinning in the porch light. His hand paused on the latch. A man alone in the mountains learned not to open doors carelessly, but there were sounds the body knew before the mind named them. This was not a man trying to enter. This was something living trying not to disappear. He opened the door. Snow rushed in at his boots. On the porch stood a German shepherd female, trembling so hard her shoulders shook. Her coat was black and gold beneath the crusted snow, dark along the ears and back, honey gold at the chest and legs. She was not young, but not old enough to carry the mountain's cruelty without protest. One ear had a small V-shaped tear along the edge. A pale scar crossed her right shoulder where wet fur clung to the skin. Her left hind leg hovered slightly, as if the cold had reached bone. In her mouth, held with strange carefulness, was an old brass room key. Owen did not move toward her. The dog watched him through amber eyes darkened by exhaustion. Not wild eyes, not lost eyes. She knew doors. She knew people. She knew enough about both to distrust them until proven otherwise. "Easy," Owen said. His voice sounded unfamiliar in the room behind him, softer than he had meant it to be. He crouched slowly, one knee touching the threshold, palm open, fingers loose. The dog's nostrils shifted. She tested his scent through the storm: smoke, wool, metal, old leather, pine dust, and the dry quiet of a man who had not expected to be needed tonight. The tag on her collar flashed when she lowered her head. Piper? The name struck him before memory did. He had seen her before, not here at his door. Not like this, shivering and half-buried in winter. Years ago, on a clear blue morning near the ranger outpost, she had trotted beside a woman with a red scarf and a laugh that carried across snow. The woman had been repairing a trail marker with the calm authority of someone who trusted the mountain because she respected how quickly it could kill. Piper had taken water from Owen's tin cup and then leaned against his boot as though approving him for limited use. Lenora Vale. That had been the woman's name. Owen remembered because she had looked at the broken snow fence he was fixing and said, "Men who repair things without being asked are either saints or hiding from conversation." He had answered, "Neither." She had laughed. "That's what the hiding ones always say." Now her dog stood at his door with a brass key in her mouth. Piper lowered her head and placed the key on the porch boards. The sound it made was small, almost polite. Then she looked past him into the warm cabin, where the fire glowed and the kettle waited. A sensible animal would have stepped inside. A desperate one would have collapsed at the heat. Piper did neither. She turned toward the road descending into the pass and gave a low sound from deep in her chest. Not a bark. A summons. Owen looked down at the key. Its brass had darkened with age, the handle oval and worn smooth by years of fingers. A small metal tag hung from it, engraved with a number nearly filled by tarnish. Room 6. Something in the cabin changed then, though nothing moved. The fire still burned. The tools still slept in their ordered drawers. The radio still whispered static under the storm. But the silence no longer belonged to him. Piper took one limping step toward the stairs, then looked back. Owen exhaled through his nose. It almost became a laugh, but there was no humor in it, only recognition. The old kind. The kind that came before a mission, before fear had a name, before a man had time to argue with what the night had brought him. "All right," he said. "I'm coming." He pulled on his gray stone parka, wrapped a smoke-colored scarf low around his neck, and clipped a flashlight to the strap across his chest. He slid a pry bar, tape, gloves, and a small medical kit into his pack. The brass key went into his front pocket, heavy as a coin placed on the tongue of a myth. Piper waited at the bottom of the porch steps, snow gathering on her back. "You're going to let me carry you?" Owen asked. The dog stared at him. "Didn't think so." She turned and began down the mountain road. The descent toward Snowline was not far by daylight. In a storm, distance became a liar. The road vanished and returned under drifts. Pines bent beneath white weight, their branches flashing in the beam of Owen's light like antlers. Wind erased their tracks almost as fast as they made them. Piper moved with painful determination, sometimes stumbling, sometimes stopping to catch her breath, but never once wandering. Owen followed close enough to grab her harness if she went down, far enough not to insult her pride. "Stubborn," he muttered after she ignored his second attempt to help. Piper flicked one torn ear without looking back. It was the first almost funny thing that had happened to him in weeks. When the trees thinned, Snowline Inn appeared below them. The old lodge sat at the bend where the pass road widened before dropping toward the valley. Its roof was steep and loaded with snow. The porch sagged slightly at one corner. Boarded windows stared out like closed eyes. The sign above the front walk swung on one chain, creaking in the wind. Snowline Inn. The letters were faded, but not gone. Owen had passed it often enough over the years. Once, before it closed, the place had glowed in winter like a lantern set for lost travelers. Trucks would line the lot during storms. Search teams drank coffee there. Skiers laughed too loudly by the stove. Somewhere inside, people had believed warmth was a thing that could be shared without keeping score. Now it looked abandoned. Piper did not go to the front door. She veered around the side, through drifts high enough to brush her ribs, toward the service entrance behind the kitchen. Owen's light caught marks in the snow near the back step, half-buried tracks, partly filled by fresh fall. Recent enough. Heavy boots. Maybe more than one visit. Piper reached the rear door and scratched once. Then Owen heard it. A dull sound from inside. Not the building shifting. Not the wind. A human hand hitting wood. He stepped closer, every old instinct waking without drama. He swept the light over the frame. The outer handle was missing. Not broken off by weather. Removed. 2 screws lay frozen in the threshold crack. A warning strip had been tacked across the side panel, flapping loose. Unsafe access. Inside, faint and hoarse, a woman's voice called, "Hello?" Owen moved fast then. "Step away from the door," he called. A pause, then weaker. "I can't. There's a cart behind me." He used the pry bar against the frame. The first pull cracked paint, the second tore wood. The third opened the door with a hard shriek, and cold air rushed into a darker cold beyond it. Owen forced the gap wide and pushed inside. The service corridor smelled of damp wood, old grease, and freezing metal. His flashlight cut across shelves, stacked pans, a tipped mop bucket, and a narrow passage leading toward the kitchen. A rolling supply cart had jammed sideways near an inner door, pinning the space smaller. Behind it sat a woman wrapped in a wool coat, one hand pressed to the wall as if she had been holding herself upright by stubbornness alone. Camille Red looked up at him through pale exhaustion. She was in her mid-40s, with auburn-brown hair fallen loose from a low tie, cheeks colorless from cold, and eyes that had learned too much about staying composed while something inside broke. Even half-frozen, she had the air of someone used to taking care of a room before entering it. "Piper?" she whispered. The dog pushed past Owen with a strength borrowed from somewhere sacred and went straight to her. Camille's hand reached down. It found Piper's head, the torn ear, the snow-matted neck. Her fingers closed there, and the breath that left her was not relief exactly. It was grief recognizing one of its own messengers. Owen moved the cart aside and crouched. "Can you stand?" "I think so." "That means no," he said, and helped her up anyway. She almost smiled. Almost. Then pain crossed her face as blood returned to stiff limbs. "What happened?" "Came to check the pipes," she said, teeth chattering. "Before the freeze got worse. Clyde Beale was here earlier. Said he needed one more look at the rear structure before the storm locked everything down." "The contractor?" Her eyes flicked toward the doorframe, toward the missing handle. "He said the back entrance wasn't safe. I didn't realize he meant to make it true." Owen said nothing, but his jaw tightened. The details arranged themselves without his permission. Removed handle, dead rear circuit, warning sign outside, no phone in reach, a storm strong enough to bury tracks. Not a clean crime. Something uglier. Something built to be explained away. An accident, if nobody came in time. Piper pressed her head against Camille's knee. Camille looked down and noticed Owen's hand moving toward his pocket. He drew out the brass key. At the sight of it, her face changed. Not fear, not surprise, a wound opening under old snow. "Oh," she whispered. Owen held the key out, but she did not take it at first. She touched it with 2 fingers as if it were warm. "Room 6, Owen said. Camille's eyes filled, though no tears fell. Lenora kept it on Piper's collar when she checked the winter maps, said a good guide never trusted memory alone. The name hung in the service corridor with the cold pipes and dead light. Lenora. Owen remembered the woman by the snow fence, the laugh, the red scarf, Piper drinking from his cup. Camille finally took the key. Her thumb moved over the worn brass, slow and reverent. "She brought you," Camille said, looking at Piper now. "Of course she did." Piper did not wag. She only leaned her scarred shoulder against Camille's leg as if holding up something no human could see. Outside, the storm hammered Snowline Inn, trying its best to make the old place vanish into white. Inside, Owen stood in the broken service doorway with snow melting from his parka and a woman trembling beside a loyal dog. He had come down the mountain because a German shepherd had asked. Now, looking at the missing handle, the dead corridor, the brass key in Camille's hand, Owen understood the night had not brought him to a rescue. It had brought him to the edge of a story someone had tried very hard to bury. And for the first time in a long while, the silence inside him did not feel empty. It felt ready. Owen did not take Camille to town. There was no town to take her to, not with the pass smothered white and the road vanishing under each new gust. The storm had climbed down from the ridgeline like a pale animal and settled its full weight over Silver Pass. Even the headlights of Owen's truck looked tired as they cut through the snow. So he brought Camille to the cabin. She sat in the passenger seat with both hands wrapped around the brass key as if it were the only warm thing left in the world. Piper lay curled across the back seat, her muzzle resting on her front paws, eyes half open and fixed on Camille's shoulder. The dog did not sleep. She watched the woman the way old guardians watched gates. Owen drove without asking questions. There would be time for those. Or there would not. He had learned in harsher places than Colorado that frightened people often spent their first answers surviving the shape of the question. At the cabin, he helped Camille inside, fed the stove, and set a kettle over the iron plate. The room filled slowly with heat and the dry scent of pine. Snow slid from his parka onto the floorboards. Camille stood near the threshold for a moment, dazed, as if she had forgotten what a safe room looked like. "Sit," Owen said. It came out like an order. Camille looked at him. He corrected himself. "Please?" That almost made her smile. She lowered herself into the chair beside the stove. She wore a wool coat darkened by damp, a cream sweater underneath, and boots crusted white at the seams. Her auburn brown hair had come loose from its tie, falling around a face too pale for comfort. She was not fragile, Owen thought. That was not the word. Fragile things broke loudly. Camille Red looked like someone who had been cracking quietly for years and had learned to sweep up the pieces before anyone visited. Piper came to her slowly, stiff in the hind leg, and placed herself against Camille's boots. Camille's hand dropped at once to the dog's head. "Your leg again?" she murmured. Piper gave a tired sigh, neither complaint nor forgiveness. Owen put a blanket around Camille's shoulders and handed her a mug of tea that was too strong and too hot. "Drink. You always this charming?" "Only in medical emergencies." A small laugh escaped her. It surprised both of them. It was thin and brief, but it lived. Owen turned away to give it privacy. For several minutes there was only the sound of the stove, the storm, and Piper's uneven breathing. Then Camille looked down at the brass key in her palm. "Room 6, she said. "I haven't opened it in almost 3 years." Owen sat across from her, elbows on his knees. The fire painted orange along the camouflage sleeves of his combat shirt, picking out the dark bands around his upper arms. Lenora's room? Camille nodded. Not bedroom, map room. She hated calling it an office. Said offices made people think of taxes, and maps deserved better company. Her thumb moved over the key's worn oval head. Lenora Vale could read snow better than most people read faces. She knew when the west wind had packed a slope too tight. She knew which gullies looked harmless until the first thaw weakened the crust. She knew where a person could survive 10 minutes longer because the pines broke the wind just enough. Camille swallowed. She made maps of all of it, hand-drawn, notes in the margins, storm routes, shelter points, places where radio signals bounced, places where they died. She said the mountain spoke all winter. Most people just didn't like what it said. Owen listened without interrupting. He had met people like that, not many. The rare ones who did not try to conquer dangerous places, only understand the price of entering them. Snowline used to be part of that, Camille continued. Not officially at first, just coffee, soup, blankets, a radio that worked when phones didn't. Search teams stopped there. Drivers waited out storms there. Hikers who thought weather reports were suggestions came in blue-lipped and left embarrassed but alive. Her voice warmed as she spoke, not with happiness exactly, but with the glow of a room remembered before the lights went out. It wasn't fancy. Floors creaked. The pipes sang whenever someone showered upstairs. Half the mugs didn't match. Lenora said matching mugs were for people who hadn't heard enough stories. Owen looked toward the window. Snow clung to the glass in bright, shifting streaks. What happened? The question was quiet. Camille's hand stilled on Piper's head. Lenora died. No drama, no flourish. The words came out clean because grief had worn them smooth. 3 winters ago, there was a volunteer call after a storm turned faster than anyone expected. A group of adults from Denver got pinned near Harlow Cut. Lenora helped guide them to an old miners' shelter. Everyone says she saved them. Camille looked at the stove. One man had wandered off before they made shelter. She went back. Piper lifted her head as if the name of that night still lived in her bones. They found the man alive, Camille said. They found Lenora too late. Owen did not offer the words people offered when they were afraid of silence. I'm sorry. She was brave. At least others lived. All true, all useless in the wrong mouth. He only said, she went back because someone was missing. Camille looked at him then. Something shifted in her expression. Not gratitude, not yet, but recognition. Yes? The storm struck the cabin hard enough to make the walls creak. Piper's torn ear twitched. The old radio near Owen's workbench hissed with static, then settled. Camille drew the blanket tighter around herself. After that, Snowline became unbearable. Every table had her hands on it. Every mark on the floor was a story she used to tell. People kept coming by with casseroles and sad eyes, and I started hating them for being kind. That happens, Owen said. She studied him, perhaps hearing more in those 2 words than he intended. I closed one wing first, then the kitchen, then the rooms. I told myself it was temporary. Repairs, insurance, winter staffing. Her mouth tightened. The lies people tell themselves are usually more polite than the ones they tell other people. Owen almost smiled at that, but did not. And Clyde Beale? The warmth left Camille's face. He was a contractor Lenora trusted once, not loved. Lenora didn't love many contractors. She said they all believed gravity was negotiable. A tired corner of Camille's mouth lifted. But Clyde knew old mountain buildings. He patched the roof twice, fixed a support near the pantry. After Lenora died, he started coming around more. Said he was looking out for me. Was he? No. The answer came faster than the breath before it. He said the structure was worse than I thought. Said I could lose liability coverage. Said the county might shut me down if I reopened without a full survey. Then reports started appearing. Damage assessments, snow load concerns, slope risk, words that sound responsible until they start tightening around your throat. Owen watched Piper's eyes. At the sound of Beale's name, the dog had gone still. Not frightened exactly, braced. "Who paid him?" Owen asked. Camille let out a humorless breath. "Black Elk Vista, investment group out of Denver, though they talk like they personally invented the Rockies. They want to build a luxury winter trail resort, glass rooms, private heated decks, guided snowmobile packages for people who use the word wilderness in brochures. And Snowline is in the way." "Snowline is the way," Camille said. "The land sits at the bend, best access point before the upper pass. If they own it, they control the winter route." There it was, Owen thought, not just an old inn, not just a grieving widow, a choke point, a place on a map someone richer had begun to call opportunity. Camille rubbed both hands around the mug. "They sent Daphne Vossler first. She doesn't threaten. That would be too honest. She talks about solutions, risk reduction, future partnerships. She wears cream wool coats in snowstorms and smiles like she has never once had cold hands." Owen glanced down at Camille's trembling fingers. "She offered to buy?" "She offered to rescue me from my own property." Camille's voice had sharpened, then softened under its own fatigue. "The worst part is, some days I wanted her to." The admission settled between them more heavily than accusation would have. Piper rose, stiff and slow, and crossed the small space to Owen. He did not move. The shepherd stood before him, scarred shoulder catching the firelight, and lowered her head, not asking for touch, not offering trust fully. Just standing there with the old brass smell of Snowline still clinging to her fur, as if delivering Camille's confession into his keeping. Owen looked at the dog, then at the key in Camille's hand. For years he had believed loneliness was safest when chosen deliberately. A cabin, a stove, tools that returned to their drawers. No one to fail, no one waiting at the window, no one saying your name in the tone that meant you had come too late. But safety, he was beginning to remember, could become a room with no handle from the inside. Camille followed his gaze toward Piper. "She kept going back," she said. "Even after I closed the inn, even after I stopped sleeping there. I'd find paw prints by the rear steps, sometimes at room 6's window. I thought she was grieving." "She was," Owen said. "Yes?" Camille's eyes shone now. "But maybe grief was not the only thing she was doing." The radio cracked before Owen could answer. A voice came through beneath static, clipped and female. "Barrett, this is Hollister. You alive up there, or did the pass finally eat that cabin?" Owen stood and crossed to the radio. "Alive!" "That's disappointing. I had money on the cabin." Camille blinked. Owen keyed the mic again. "I have Camille Red here. Pulled her out of Snowline's rear service corridor. Hypothermia risk, mild to moderate. Dog found me first." There was a pause. The static seemed to listen. Then the voice lost its dry edge. "Piper?" Camille leaned toward the radio. Owen looked at her, then pressed the mic. "Yes, Piper." Another pause, shorter. "I'm coming at first light," May Hollister said. "Nobody goes back to Snowline before I get there. You hear me?" Owen looked at Piper. The dog had turned toward the window, her amber eyes fixed on the white dark beyond it. "I hear you." "I mean it, Barrett. That place has enough ghosts without you adding your stubborn carcass." "Copy." The radio clicked off. Camille sat very still. "May worked with Lenora," she said. "On rescues, trail closures. Sometimes they fought so loudly in the kitchen, I gave free pie to the guests as hazard pay. Sounds like a useful woman." "She is, which means she'll ask for proof." Good. Camille looked at him. Owen returned to his chair. He could feel the old part of himself arranging facts, timelines, access points, names. Beale, Black Elk Vista, Daphne Vossler, removed handle, dead circuit. Piper with a key. He did not like how neatly the pieces refused to become an accident. Camille must have seen something in his face because she said, "You don't have to be pulled into this." Owen looked at the stove. The fire had settled into a bed of deep coals, red under black, still hot enough to carry the room through the night if fed before dawn. "No," he said, "I don't." Piper came back to Camille and lay down by the chair, but her eyes stayed on Owen. He had no oath here, no orders, no unit, no family name tied to Snowline's old sign. The mountain outside could bury roads, tracks, and weaken tensions by morning. He could let May handle it, let Camille choose what she could bear. Let Piper rest. Instead, he stood, took another split log from the stack, and set it in the stove. A small act, almost nothing. Yet Camille watched him as if he had answered a question she had not asked. At dawn, the storm thinned, but did not leave. The world outside turned iron blue, then pearl gray. Snow lay deep over the porch rail and softened the shape of Owen's truck. Piper had slept only in fragments, waking whenever the wind struck the walls. Camille had finally dozed in the chair beneath two blankets, the brass key still caught in her hand. Owen was pouring coffee when headlights pushed through the trees. A green Ranger truck stopped below the cabin. The woman who stepped out looked like the kind of person Winter had tried to intimidate years ago and then given up on. May Hollister was in her early 50s, compact and steady, with gray hair tied low beneath a dark knit cap and a forest green ranger coat dusted white at the shoulders. She carried a black waterproof map tube across her back and moved up the steps without wasting a motion. When Owen opened the door, she looked him over once. "You look terrible." "Morning to you, too." "I wasn't greeting you. I was assessing damage." She stepped inside before he invited her, then stopped when she saw Camille. Her expression changed, not softening exactly, but lowering its weapons. Camille. Camille woke fully at the sound of her name. May crossed the room and crouched in front of her. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then May took Camille's cold hands between her gloved ones. "You should have called me sooner." Camille's smile was small and wounded. "I got tired of needing rescue." May glanced at Piper, who had lifted her head. Somebody disagreed. Piper gave one slow thump of her tail against the floor. May turned to Owen. "Tell me everything." He did. He gave the facts in order. Piper at the cabin, the key, the route to Snowline, the missing handle, the dead rear circuit, the warning strip, Camille's condition, Beale's name. May listened without interrupting. Her face did not show surprise, but the pencil in her hand moved faster as Owen spoke. When he finished, she looked at Camille. "Did Beale know you were inside?" Camille looked toward the fire. "He knew I was checking the pipes." "That isn't what I asked." The room held still. "I don't know," Camille said, "but I think he knew enough not to check." May nodded once. That seemed to anger her more than a louder answer would have. "Memory won't hold this," May said. Not against Beale, not against Black Elk Vista, not against Daphne Vossler with her polished little liability speeches. Camille closed her eyes at the name. May continued. "We need photos, contract copies, survey reports, dates, original maps, if they still exist." "They exist," Camille whispered. Piper rose at that. Her movement was small, but everyone saw it. May looked at the dog, then at the brass key in Camille's palm. "Room 6, she said. Camille nodded. The cabin fell quiet again, but the quiet had changed. It no longer belonged to grief alone. It had become the silence before work begins. Owen looked out the window toward the buried road descending into Silver Pass. Snowline Inn waited below, shuttered and white, with its old rooms full of cold air and unfinished answers. He had not chosen the inn. He had not chosen Camille's sorrow. He had certainly not chosen a scarred German shepherd with a talent for dragging men out of well-built isolation. But as Piper limped to the door and stood there facing the valley, Owen understood something with a clarity that felt almost inconvenient. Some houses kept people out. Some called them back. And somewhere below them, under all that snow, Snowline Inn had begun calling. By late morning, the storm had loosened its fist. It had not left Silver Pass. Storms in those mountains rarely left all at once. They retreated like proud old kings, sending back small patrols of wind and white powder to remind the living who truly owned the heights. But the road below Owen's cabin had reappeared in broken strips, dark gravel showing through where the plow had passed once before, giving up. May Hollister drove first. Her green Ranger truck crawled downhill with its hazard lights blinking red against the snow. Owen followed in his old truck, Camille in the passenger seat, and Piper stretched across the back, refusing every attempt to be left behind. The German shepherd had eaten half a strip of dried meat, accepted water, and then stood by the cabin door with such solemn accusation that even May had stopped arguing. "She collapses, you carry her," May had said. Owen had looked at Piper. Piper had looked at Owen. Neither of them appeared pleased with the arrangement. Snowline Inn came into view below the last bend, pale and broad under its winter burden. In daylight, it looked less haunted than ashamed. The boarded windows, the snow-heavy porch, the faded sign swinging on one chain, none of it seemed dead exactly. More like a once-warm creature pretending sleep was the same as peace. Camille did not speak when they pulled in. Her hand went first to the brass key in her coat pocket. Owen saw the movement and said nothing. Some people crossed battlefields with rifles. Some crossed kitchens with old keys. May stepped out, boots sinking into the drift. She wore her forest green Ranger coat, a black waterproof map tube over one shoulder, and a face that suggested weather, liars, and poorly written reports had all disappointed her equally. "Before anyone gets poetic," she said, "we document." Camille let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Owen pulled his camera from the truck console. "Door first?" "Door first," May said. "Then electrical, rear access, roofline, pantry beam, and anything Clyde Beale called catastrophic with a straight face." Inside, the inn received them with cold air and old wood. The lobby smelled of dust, pine cleaner, and something faintly sweet beneath it, like cinnamon trapped in the walls. Chairs had been turned upside down on tables. A row of mismatched mugs sat behind the counter, waiting for hands that had stopped coming. On the wall near the fireplace, a chalkboard still carried ghost-white letters. "Soup for search teams." No charge. Someone had drawn a small crooked star beside it. Camille stopped there. For one moment, she was no longer the woman in Owen's cabin, wrapped in a blanket and trying not to shake. She was the keeper of this room, the one who knew which floorboard complained near the stairs, which window rattled before a west wind, which drawer stuck unless lifted first. Then grief found her face. "That was Lenora's handwriting," she said. May did not soften her voice. Maybe she knew Camille would not survive softness yet. "Then we preserve it too." She took a photograph of the chalkboard. Owen watched Camille straighten slightly at that. Not much. Enough. They moved through Snowline with slow purpose. May called out details and Owen photographed them. The rear service door, missing its handle. The screws left behind. The warning strip tacked outside. The breaker panel in the utility nook, one sub-circuit, flipped and taped as if someone had wanted the dark to look official. May peeled the tape back with 2 fingers. cute," she muttered. "Professional opinion?" Owen asked. "Professional opinion is longer and contains words I'm not supposed to say in front of grieving property owners." "I've heard worse," Camille said from the doorway. May looked over. "Good. Then I'll write the clean version for the county." They inspected the pantry beam Beale had marked in one report as severely compromised. It had water staining near the edge, and the wood did need work, but Owen pressed a gloved knuckle against it and listened to the sound. "Not rotten through," he said. May nodded. "Moisture damage. Repairable." "He made it sound like the whole back half was ready to fold," Camille said. "That's because repairable doesn't scare widows into selling," May replied. The word widow struck harder than intended. May seemed to know it the moment it left her mouth, but Camille only looked toward the kitchen, where pale light lay across empty tables. "It worked for a while," Camille said. No one answered. Sometimes truth did not need comfort. It needed witnesses. They reached the second floor near noon. The hallway was colder than the lobby, the carpet runner faded red beneath a film of dust. At the far end stood room 6. Piper had been walking slowly behind them, her nails ticking softly against the wood. But at the sight of that door, she moved ahead. Not quickly. Her damaged leg would not allow drama. She simply placed herself before the room and looked back at Camille. The brass key came out of Camille's pocket. Her fingers shook. Owen had seen men freeze before entering rooms where danger waited. Camille's fear was different. No enemy behind the door, no trap, just the terrible possibility that memory might still smell the same. May stepped back. Owen did too. Camille slid the key into the lock. For a second, it resisted. Metal after years of disuse. Then the old mechanism turned with a soft click that seemed much louder than it was. The door opened. Room 6 was small, narrow and cold, but it did not feel abandoned. It felt kept, not clean, not perfectly. Dust lay over the desk. Frost silvered the lower window corners, but the room had an order to it, an old devotion. Wooden racks lined one wall, holding rolled maps tied with cotton tape. A drafting table stood beneath the window. Colored pencils rested in a jar. A red scarf hung from the back of a chair, faded with age and sunlight. Camille made a sound so quiet, Owen almost missed it. Piper went straight to the scarf. She did not bite it or paw at it. She only pressed her muzzle into the wool and stood there, eyes closing. Camille covered her mouth. May looked away first. Owen did not. Not because he was hard, because somebody had to hold the room steady while Camille stepped back into it. "These aren't official," Camille whispered after a while. "That's what I told myself. Just Lenora's notes." May moved to the rack and read one label aloud. "West Ridge drift patterns, late season, Harlow Cut storm route, radio dead zones by elevation, alternate shelter points." Her eyebrows shifted. "Camille." "What?" "These are not just notes." She untied one roll and spread it on the drafting table. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but remained clear. Lenora's handwriting moved along the margins in small, disciplined lines. Arrows marked wind channels. Blue pencil traced safe tree cover. Red crosses marked slopes to avoid under specific conditions. May's hand hovered over one section. "Here," she said. Beale's report called this chute active above snowline. Camille leaned closer. Owen stood behind them, reading the terrain more by instinct than expertise. May tapped the map. "But Lenora labels that chute east of Harlow Cut, not above the inn. If Beale used the wrong name on purpose, he made Snowline look like it sits under a danger path it doesn't actually face." "Can you prove that?" Camille asked. May's eyes sharpened. "Not with sentiment. With current snow data, county terrain layers, and original survey markers. But this gives us a place to start." Camille stared at the map. not like a person finding treasure, like a person realizing the dead had not left instructions for grief alone. They had left work. A sound came from downstairs. All four of them froze. Owen's body changed without announcing it. His shoulders lowered, his breathing quieted. May noticed and put one hand near the radio on her chest. Then the sound came again. A heavy knock at the front door, followed by a man's voice. "May, you drag me up this hill to look at bad carpentry, or is there coffee involved?" May closed her eyes. "That'll be Silas." Camille wiped quickly beneath one eye, annoyed at the evidence of feeling. "Silas Mercer? You know another fool who would come uphill in this weather for the promise of judging someone else's beamwork?" They went downstairs. The man waiting in the lobby looked like he had been carved from old fence posts and bad decisions. Silas Mercer stood in a brown canvas coat dusted with snow, flannel collar crooked, beard gray, and uneven across a weather-worn face. His shoulders were thick but slightly bowed, as if years of carrying lumber had convinced his spine that apology was a natural posture. In one hand he held a yellow folding ruler, in the other a battered tool bag. His eyes found Camille and immediately tried to escape. "Mrs. Red." "Camille," she said. He swallowed. "Camille." The silence between them had history in it. May broke it with mercy, disguised as impatience. "Silas, rear service door, pantry beam, roofline over kitchen, and any place Clyde Beale used the word catastrophic." Silas snorted. "Clyde uses catastrophic when he can't spell expensive." Owen liked him a little for that. They began again. This time, the inn sounded different. Silas tapped beams, scraped at wood, muttered to himself, sniffed once at a damp corner like an offended bear. In the pantry, he frowned at a support Clyde had claimed was failing. "Needs sistering," Silas said. "Not replacement. Not evacuation, not whatever circus word he put in that report." May showed him a copy Camille had brought from a folder in the lobby office. Silas adjusted his glasses, then went still. "That's my name." Camille turned. "What?" He held the page closer. His thumb moved beneath the signature. "That's supposed to be my signature. It isn't." The cold in the pantry seemed to deepen. May took the paper from him carefully. "You're certain?" Silas gave her a look. "Woman, I've signed my name drunker than a bishop at Christmas, and still better than that." Camille almost laughed, then did not. Silas's face changed as he looked at her. Shame worked through him, slow and visible. "I should have come sooner," he said. Camille's hand tightened on the edge of the shelf. "Why didn't you?" He looked at the floor. There were easy answers available: pride, work, weather, not wanting to get involved. He chose none of them. "Because I owed you, and owing good people makes a coward feel poorer than owing the bank." No one moved. Piper came forward, sniffed Silas's boot, and sneezed. Silas looked down. "Well, hello to you, too." May muttered, "Dog's an excellent judge of confessions." The moment should not have been funny. Somehow it was, not enough to heal anything, enough to let the room breathe. By mid-afternoon, the evidence had begun to gather in small, stubborn piles. Photographs, notes, measurements, a questionable signature, a door made unsafe by human hands, maps that challenged the geography of Beale's report. But Snowline had one more silence waiting. Camille led them to the small office behind the front desk where insurance papers, old guest ledgers, and repair invoices had been stored. The door was unlocked. Inside, the drawers were half open. Files lay disturbed across the floor. Camille stopped at the threshold. "No," she said softly. May stepped in first and crouched. Owen followed, scanning the room with the flashlight through the window gave enough day. Nothing dramatic had been smashed. That made it worse. Whoever had searched the office had known what to touch and what to leave looking merely untidy. Camille went to the cabinet marked Insurance/Permits. Her hands moved through the folders. "Copies are missing," she said. "The older liability letters, snow load inspection, the first repair notes from before Clyde took over." May's mouth flattened. "Anything else?" Camille looked toward an empty slot near the back. "The binder Lenora kept for rescue support logs." Silas swore under his breath. Owen turned toward the rear hall. There, near the back exit leading toward the woodshed, fresh snow had blown across the floor. A side door stood not fully latched. Beyond it, in the shallow drift beneath the overhang, boot prints marked the snow, newer than the storm's first fall, too clean to be old. Owen crouched. "Someone was here after Beale left you," he said. Camille's face drained. May photographed the prints from 3 angles, then placed a pen beside one for scale. Piper moved to the hallway. Her hackles rose, but she did not bark. She stood with her body angled toward Camille, then toward room 6 above, as if deciding which living thing and which memory needed guarding more. A low growl rolled from her chest. It was not loud. It was enough. Owen stood slowly, feeling the inn around him differently now. Snowline was not a ruin, not yet. It was a witness. Every warped board, every missing file, every cold room held some part of what had been done to it. May closed her notebook. "Now," she said, voice quiet and hard, "we have a problem worth making official." Camille looked up the stairs toward room 6, then at Piper, then at the disturbed office floor. For the first time since Owen had met her, the grief in her face made room for anger. Not wild anger, useful anger. The kind that could carry a person back through a door she had avoided for 3 years. Outside, snow began to fall again, lightly this time, bright flakes drifting past the windows as if the mountain were pretending innocence. Inside Snowline Inn, no one believed it. Piper remained in the hallway, scarred shoulder forward, torn ear lifted, guarding the passage without command. She was not pointing to a secret. She was remembering a home, and memory, Owen was beginning to understand, could be a fiercer guard than any lock. Daphne Vossler arrived at Snowline Inn on a noon so clear it looked dishonest. The storm clouds had pulled back from Silver Pass, leaving the sky a hard winter blue, and the snow bright enough to sting the eyes. Sunlight flashed from the roof lines, from the crusted drifts, from the ice clinging to the porch rail. The mountain wore purity like a mask, and every scar beneath it seemed temporarily forgiven. Owen did not trust days like that. He stood near the front window of the inn, looking past the frost feathering the glass. May was at the long table by the fireplace, spreading Lenora's maps beside a copy of Beale's report. Silas Mercer crouched near the hearth with a pencil behind one ear, muttering measurements to himself as if numbers had personally insulted him. Camille stood behind the counter, not making coffee, only holding a mug with both hands as though the weight steadied her. Piper lay under the chalkboard that still read, "Soup for search teams." No charge. Her head was down, but her eyes were open. She saw the vehicles before anyone heard them. Her torn left ear lifted. A black SUV rolled into the lot first, tires compressing the fresh snow with quiet authority. Behind it came Clyde Beale's white pickup, its company logo half peeled from the door, the sort of detail Owen noticed because men often lied through what they failed to maintain. The SUV door opened. Daphne Vossler stepped out as if the weather had been arranged for her entrance. She wore a long cream wool coat, black leather gloves, and dark boots, polished clean enough to feel insulting in a place where everyone else carried the mountain on their hems. Her ash-blonde hair was pinned in a low knot beneath a pale scarf, and her face held a careful, pleasant composure. Not warm. Warmth made promises. Daphne offered terms. Clyde Beale followed from the pickup with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. Broad-shouldered, red-faced, and thick through the middle, he wore a tan construction jacket, too clean for a man supposedly concerned with unsafe structures. He looked toward the roof first, then toward the windows, then toward the front door. Not like a man inspecting a building, like a man checking whether his story still stood. May did not rise. "Company," Owen said. Silas looked up from the hearth. "If it's Beale, I'm allowed one insult before lunch." "No," May said. "One small one?" "No." "Fine. But if he says catastrophic, I'm counting that as provocation." Camille did not laugh. Her face had gone still. Owen crossed to the door and opened it before Daphne could knock. Cold air entered with her perfume, clean and faint, some expensive winter scent trying to pretend it had never met smoke, wet dogs, or old wood. Daphne's eyes took in Owen in a single polished sweep. Olive drab combat shirt under an open parka, camouflage sleeves, silver-brown undercut hair, clean-shaven jaw, the steady stillness of a man who did not step aside simply because someone expected him to. "Mr. Barrett," she said. Owen had not told her his name. He let that sit between them. Daphne smiled as though silence were only another language she had paid to learn. "Daphne Vossler, Black Elk Vista." "I know who sent you." "Then introductions have already been efficient." Clyde came up behind her, boots heavy on the porch. "Camille," he called past Owen, "we need to talk like adults before this gets worse." Silas made a sound from inside that might have been a cough if Mercy had been involved. May finally stood. "Come in. Wipe your feet. The building you're trying to condemn has floors." Daphne entered first. Clyde followed, brushing snow off his shoulders with theatrical annoyance. Piper rose slowly as they came in. Her hind legs stiffened. She did not bark. She moved to Camille's side and stood there, scarred shoulder forward, amber eyes fixed on Beale. Clyde noticed. His mouth tightened for half a second. Daphne noticed too, but her expression did not change. That was one of her gifts, Owen thought. She could see a wound and calculate whether it was useful without letting the wound know. "Camille," Daphne said, turning away from Piper with practiced gentleness. "I'm relieved to see you safe. When Clyde told me you had been at the property during the storm, we were very concerned." Camille's fingers tightened around her mug. "You were concerned after he left me in the rear corridor?" Beale's face flushed deeper. "I didn't leave you anywhere. I told you that rear entrance was unsafe. I assumed you had gone out front." May lifted her notebook. "You removed the exterior handle?" "I removed a failed handle," Clyde said. "Temporary safety measure." "And flipped the rear circuit?" "Electrical hazard." "And didn't verify the owner had exited the area?" Daphne raised one gloved hand slightly, elegant as a conductor asking strings to soften. "We can trade accusations all afternoon, Ranger Hollister, but that won't change the fundamental issue. Snowline is not approved for operation. Its condition exposes Ms. Red to serious liability. My clients remain willing to offer a clean path forward before the county becomes more deeply involved." "A clean path," Camille repeated. The words came out tired. Daphne turned to her, softening her voice with surgical skill. "You have carried this place alone for 3 years. No reasonable person would fault you for choosing relief." There it was, not a threat. A pillow pressed gently over resistance. Owen watched Camille absorb it. He saw the small downward pull at her shoulders, the reflex of a person who had been told too many times that surrender was the mature name for survival. Piper leaned against her leg. Not dramatically, not enough to knock her off balance. Just enough weight to remind Camille that she was not the only living thing in the room with memory. Camille set the mug down. "What exactly are you offering now?" Daphne's smile warmed by half a degree. She opened her leather folder and placed several papers on the table with the care of someone laying out surgical instruments. An updated purchase offer, immediate assumption of outstanding repair liabilities, assistance with any insurance complications, a release regarding certain structural disclosures, provided we move quickly and without public dispute. May's eyes narrowed. That last phrase is doing a lot of work. Daphne turned. Public dispute damages everyone. No, May said. Sometimes it identifies who already did damage. Clyde slapped his clipboard against his palm. This is ridiculous. The building has active snow load issues, compromised access points, and slope exposure. You all want to play innkeeper with a death trap because of nostalgia. Silas rose, slowly. The room seemed to notice his height only after he stood. He was not tall like Owen, but thick, work-worn, built of wood smoke and old regret. Say catastrophic, he told Clyde. May closed her eyes. Silas. I'm giving him choices. Clyde glared. You got something to say, Mercer? Silas walked to the table and took the repair sheet from May's folder. He held it up with 2 fingers. This your office? Clyde glanced at it. That's a standard repair verification. With my name on it. You signed off on a prior inspection. No, I didn't. Silas's voice stayed flat, which made it worse. That signature looks like my name fell down some stairs. Daphne looked at Clyde. For the first time, something moved behind her polished face. Clyde recovered fast. Could be a clerical transfer. My admin handles old paperwork. You don't have an admin, Silas said. You have a nephew who answers the phone when he isn't asleep in your truck. A brief, dangerous silence followed. Owen saw Silas's hands curl. He stepped close enough for Silas to feel him there, not restraining him yet, only anchoring the air. Clyde saw the movement and smiled. It was small. It was exactly what he wanted. Careful, Mercer, Clyde said. You spent enough years being unreliable. Don't make a public habit of it. Silas lunged half a step. Owen's hand closed around his arm. Not hard, hard enough. Silas looked at him, fury and shame burning together. Owen spoke low, so only Silas and perhaps Camille could hear. One punch helps him more than any signature ever could. Silas breathed like a saw cutting wet wood. Then he stepped back. May's pencil stopped moving for one quiet second. Camille watched Owen, and something in her expression changed. Not gratitude, something more useful than gratitude. Trust becoming practical. Daphne gathered the moment, trying to repair its shape. Gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of volatility my clients hope to avoid. Camille, you deserve an exit that preserves dignity. Camille looked at the papers. For a moment, the inn seemed to lean toward her. Every cold room, every unpaid bill, every memory with Lenora's fingerprints on it. Owen could almost see the temptation. Sign here and let the burden become someone else's architecture. Camille touched the edge of the offer. Piper pushed her head beneath Camille's hand. Camille did not look down, but her fingers found the dog's torn ear. Daphne's gaze flicked there, quick and assessing. Owen understood then that Daphne's danger was not cruelty. Cruelty was blunt. Daphne's danger was that she could make exhaustion sound like wisdom. May broke the spell by unrolling one of Lenora's maps. No one signs anything until we discuss geography. Daphne's eyes cooled. A hand-drawn map is not a legal survey. Didn't say it was. May pinned the map corners with 2 mugs and a wrench from Silas's bag. But it is a record created by a certified mountain guide who worked multiple rescue routes in this pass for more than a decade, and it conflicts with Mr. Beale's report in a very interesting way. Clyde snorted. That woman's hobby sketches don't override structural assessment. Camille's face hardened at that. Owen saw it. So did May. May tapped the report. You identify the chute above Snowline as Harlow East Run. That's what locals call it. No, May said. Locals call the chute above Snowline Elk Shoulder. Harlow East Run is nearly a mile northeast, beyond the old miner's cut. That's semantics. It's terrain. May's voice sharpened. And in winter terrain, names are not decoration. They tell people where not to die. Daphne stepped closer to the table. May continued. Lenora's map marks Harlow East Run here. County terrain layers should confirm it. Your report uses the hazard profile of that chute and applies it to this property. Clyde's jaw shifted. Old map, old names. May pulled a folded county printout from her tube and placed it beside Lenora's work. Funny, the old names match the county's avalanche education archive from 12 years ago. Your report does not. The inn held its breath. Daphne looked down. This time she did not smile. The change was not dramatic. No gasp, no accusation, no villain caught under lightning. Only a woman who had assumed the dirty work was beneath her, suddenly seeing mud on the hem of her own coat. Camille stared at the two maps. So he moved the mountain, she said softly. Silas grunted. On paper, cheaper than moving it for real. Daphne closed her folder. Even if there are questions about terminology, she said, each word measured now, Snowline remains closed. If anyone is housed, fed, sheltered, or otherwise received here before proper approval, the liability falls on you, Camille. Not on Mr. Barrett, not on Ranger Hollister. On you. The words landed where she aimed them. Camille did not flinch this time. I understand. I'm not sure you do. Camille lifted her eyes. No, I do. That's the first useful thing you've said today. May's mouth twitched. Daphne's gloves creaked as her fingers tightened around the folder. We'll be in contact through counsel, she said. You do that, May replied. Clyde looked at Owen before leaving, perhaps hoping for a glare, a threat, something he could use later. Owen gave him nothing but attention. Men like Clyde hated attention without emotion. It gave them no handle to grab. The SUV and pickup pulled away minutes later, leaving tracks like dark stitches across the white lot. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Silas let out a breath. I behaved. May looked at him. Barely. Still counts. Camille laughed once. He had broken the middle, but it was real. By evening, the cold deepened again. May drove down toward the ranger station to push for a formal terrain review before the next storm system arrived. Silas stayed to board a weak kitchen window and reinforce the rear latch. Owen helped without being asked, passing tools in the comfortable silence of people who understood work better than consolation. After Silas left, Snowline grew quiet around Owen and Camille. The old kitchen stove had been coaxed into life. Its heat was uneven but loyal. Camille made coffee so strong it seemed less brewed than excavated. Piper lay between them on the worn rug, asleep at last, her paws twitching now and then as if she were following someone through snow. Camille sat at the kitchen table with Daphne's unsigned offer beside her. I almost signed one like it last month, she said. Owen looked at the paper, then at her. Because you believed them? No. She rubbed both hands over her face. Because I was tired. That answer did not ask for judgment, so he gave none. I was tired of waking up in a building full of her. Tired of the mugs, the maps, the way people said Lenora's name like I was supposed to become braver every time I heard it. Her voice thinned, but did not break. Some days I wanted Snowline gone because I thought if the walls were gone, maybe the echo would stop. Owen understood too well. His cabin stood in his mind then. The stove, the tools, the radio, the silence he had arranged so carefully around himself. A place without photographs could still become a monument. You did not need portraits to worship what you had lost. Sometimes all you needed was a locked door and the habit of not answering when life knocked. "I get that," he said. Camille looked at him and perhaps heard the shape of a room behind his words. Piper sighed in her sleep, long and weary, like an old aunt disappointed in the emotional progress of everyone present. Camille looked down at her. "She knew before I did. Dogs are rude that way." That made Camille smile. The coffee steamed between them. Outside, the wind moved over the roof, softer now, but not gone. Snowline creaked and settled around them, an old body deciding whether it wished to stand another winter. Camille reached for Daphne's offer. For 1 second, Owen thought she might tear it. Instead, she folded it carefully and set it beneath Lenora's map. "Not yet," she said. It was not victory. It was not defiance shouted from a porch. It was a woman too tired to pretend she was fearless, choosing not to surrender before the next morning. Owen accepted that as the stronger thing. Piper opened one eye, saw the papers weighted under the map, and went back to sleep. For the first time all day, Snowline Inn felt less like a grave, not alive yet, but listening. The next storm came early. It arrived without the courtesy of a dark sky. There was no slow bruising of clouds, no warning gloom rolling over the ridge like an army banner. Instead, the whole mountain turned white with light. Snow filled the air so completely that Silver Pass seemed to vanish from the world. The pines became pale shadows. The road became a rumor. The windows of Snowline Inn glowed and blurred until the outside looked less like weather than a blank page being pressed against the glass. Owen stood near the front door, one hand on the latch, watching the storm erase the lot. "Forecast said evening," Silas muttered from the hearth, where he had been trying to persuade the old stovepipe to draw properly. "Forecast also said mild gusts. Forecast can come up here and kiss my frozen ladder." May Hollister stood by the radio set they had moved onto the front counter. Static breathed from it in fits and starts. Her gray hair had come loose at one temple, and the pencil behind her ear looked like it had survived a minor war. She was studying the window the way a doctor might study a patient, pretending not to be sick. "This isn't mild," she said. Camille was in the kitchen, taking inventory of anything that could become food, heat, or comfort. Soup cans, rice, coffee, dry beans, a crate of mismatched mugs, old towels, 2 wool blankets that smelled faintly of cedar and years of being folded away. Every item she touched seemed to wake something in her. Snowline had not hosted anyone in months, but the habits of shelter returned to her hands faster than hope returned to her face. Piper lay at the foot of the stairs, head up, ears uneven, scarred shoulder turned toward the lobby. She had refused the soft blanket Camille placed near the stove and had chosen the hall instead, where she could see the front door, the kitchen, and the stairway to room 6. Owen noticed. Of course he did. The dog was exhausted. Her hind leg trembled when she stood too long. Her ribs no longer showed sharply beneath the gold and black fur, but weakness still hung on her like a second coat. Yet she positioned herself where all paths crossed. A guard, Owen thought, or a memory with teeth. The radio cracked. May snatched the handset before the second burst of static finished. "Hollister, go." The reply came broken, swallowed by storm noise. "Unit, transfer, 2 personnel. Lower bend, visibility gone. Radio crate, stuck off marker." May's face changed, not panic. May did not appear built for panic, but something in her narrowed until the whole room felt it. "Identify location." Static. Then a male voice, strained but controlled. "Below Snowline, maybe half mile. Can't see road stakes. Front tire dropped. Not injured. Cold getting in." May swore once, quietly and with discipline. Owen was already moving toward the map table. "Rescue volunteers?" he asked. 2, May said. "Carrying spare radio equipment up to the ranger station. I told them to hold until morning." "Did they?" "They apparently filed my advice under decorative noise." Silas stood, reaching for his coat. "Where?" May spread a county road sheet beside Lenora's maps. Her finger traced the lower bend, then stopped. "If they're where I think they are, the main road cuts close to the shallow drainage under Elk Shoulder." Camille came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "In this wind, that drainage feels smooth." May looked at her. Camille looked back, and for the first time since Owen had met her, she did not seem to shrink from being needed. "Lenora marked another route," Camille said. The room fell quiet, except for the hiss of snow against glass. She went to the stairs. Piper rose at once. "No," Camille said softly. "Stay." Piper ignored this with the serene disrespect of dogs who know when humans are making poor suggestions. Camille climbed to room 6, and Owen followed far enough to see her open the door without hesitating this time. Not bravely. Bravery was too shiny a word for it. She opened it like a woman lifting a weight she had finally accepted was hers. She returned with a map tube tied in faded blue cotton. On the label, in Lenora's small handwriting, were the words, "Storm Route B, West Ridge, wind only." Camille unrolled it across the front table. May placed 2 mugs and Silas's folding ruler at the corners. The map showed Snowline, the lower bend, a stand of dense pines, a shallow ravine, and a thin blue route curving away from the road before returning below the ridge. May bent close. "The West Ridge is driving the storm," she said. Camille nodded. "Lenora said if wind came from there, the road would look safer than it was. It feels flat, like a tablecloth over a hole." Owen studied the lines. "Route through the low pines?" "Yes, slower, less exposed." "Any slope load above it?" "Minimal," May said. "If Lenora's tree cover notes still hold." Silas grunted. "That's comforting in the same way as a ladder missing only one rung." May was already checking gear. "We go light. Rope, markers, first aid kit, thermal blankets. Owen, you take point, but you do not freelance. This is my rescue." Owen nodded. He appreciated that she said it. Silas grabbed a coil of rope from the utility wall and a small axe. "I'm coming." May looked him over. "Try not to become cargo." "Put that on my headstone." Camille reached for her coat. May shook her head. "No." Camille's face tightened. "I know the route." "You know the room with the stove, the blankets, the register, and the coffee. If we bring them back cold, you're the reason they stay alive after the dramatic people stop being dramatic." Camille looked ready to argue. Then her gaze moved to the kitchen. The old Snowline habit returned fully then. Not the grief, not the locked room, the work. "I'll have heat and soup ready," she said, "and dry socks if the mouse hasn't claimed the drawer." "Good," May said. "If the mouse did, negotiate." Owen pulled his gloves tight. Piper pressed against his leg. "No," he said. Piper looked up at him. He had faced armed men with less confidence than that dog. Camille knelt, her hand on Piper's neck. Only to the tree line, then back. Piper leaned into her touch for one breath, then moved toward the door. No one had the heart or authority to stop her. Outside, the storm took shape around them like a living thing. The world was not dark. That made it worse. Everything glowed white. Snow moved sideways, upward, circular, as if the mountain had forgotten the rules of falling. Owen walked first, one hand holding a short marker pole, the other free. May followed with the map sealed in a clear waterproof sleeve against her chest. Silas came behind, rope over one shoulder, muttering insults at every gust, strong enough to deserve one. Piper moved near Owen's left knee. Slow, determined, too proud to be carried. They left the road after 40 yards, just as Lenora's map instructed. The pines swallowed them by degrees. Wind softened under the branches, though snow still sifted through in cold handfuls. Owen placed temporary markers where May directed. Silas checked tension on the rope when visibility dropped to almost nothing. For a while, the map became the world. Not paper, not memory. Instruction. Camille's voice came through the radio from Snowline, faint but steady. "May, I have the stove going. Water's hot. Front room cleared. I found 6 blankets, 3 that don't smell like betrayal, and 1 that might be older than Colorado." May keyed back. "Prioritize the non-haunted blankets." Owen almost smiled. Then Piper stopped. She did not bark. She did not lunge. She simply planted all 4 paws and lowered her head toward a smooth white patch ahead where the snow lay strangely perfect between 2 low shrubs. Owen halted. Silas nearly walked into him. "What?" Owen raised one fist. May came beside him, crouched, and brushed snow from the edge with her glove. Beneath the top crust was a faint hollow where wind had bridged over a drainage cut. "Damn," she whispered. The road route would have taken them straight across its wider mouth. Even here, the edge was treacherous. Owen looked down at Piper. The dog's torn ear was flattened, her body trembling from effort, but her eyes remained fixed on the snow as if offended by its lie. May checked Lenora's map again. "There's a second tree mark," she said. 10 yards upslope. We angle left." Silas stared at Piper. "Dog just saved me from becoming a cautionary tale." Owen looked at the perfect white patch, then at the dog. "No," he said quietly. She confirmed the map. May glanced at him. Owen did not explain. He did not need to. Piper had not performed a miracle. Lenora had drawn the warning years ago. Piper had remembered the feel of unsafe snow, the hesitation of the woman who once guided her, perhaps the scent of open cold rising under crust. The living and the dead had met at the edge of a hole and told the humans to stop. That was enough wonder for one storm. They found the stranded volunteers 20 minutes later. The vehicle had slid nose first into a drift beside a buried marker, one front tire hanging low where the shoulder had collapsed. 2 men in rescue jackets waited inside, faces pale with cold and embarrassment. The older one, broad and bearded, opened the door carefully when Owen tapped the window. "Ranger Hollister?" he called. May leaned in. "You two enjoying your scenic consequences?" The younger volunteer, shivering under his hood, managed, "Not our best route choice." "Good. Awareness is the first step toward not making me hike in this nonsense." Silas secured the rear line while Owen and May helped them out one at a time. The spare radio crate was heavier than it looked, but Silas insisted on dragging it with a sled strap and complained the whole way, which seemed to improve morale. The return was slower. One volunteer stumbled twice. Owen took his weight without comment. Piper fell behind near the tree line, and this time Owen did not ask permission. He crouched, lifted her carefully against his chest, and carried her the last stretch through the lot. Piper gave one offended huff. "File a complaint," Owen said. When they reached Snowline, the front door opened before they knocked. Warmth poured out. So did the smell of soup, coffee, wet wool, and something almost forgotten: usefulness. Camille stood in the doorway with a lantern in one hand, her red-brown hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, apron tied over her sweater. Behind her, the lobby had changed. Blankets lay folded over chair backs. Mugs lined the counter. The old guest register was open beside a pen. The stove glowed. The room, which had seemed like a sleeping animal that morning, now had a heartbeat. "Inside," Camille said. No one argued. The rescued men were seated by the fire, boots removed, blankets wrapped around them. Camille moved with brisk, quiet authority, handing out soup, taking names for the register, noting condition and time. May updated the ranger station by radio. Silas dropped the radio crate near the counter and declared it the ugliest baby he had ever delivered. Camille handed him coffee. He took one sip and winced. "This is strong enough to finish collapsing the roof." Camille did not look up from ladling soup. "Then it's stronger than Beale's report." The room went still for half a second. Then Silas barked a laugh. May's mouth twitched. Even the younger volunteer smiled into his mug. It was not joy exactly. It was better than joy for that moment. It was proof the inn could still make people human in the middle of fear. Owen set Piper on a blanket near the hearth. The dog lowered herself with a sigh and did not fight when Camille checked her paws. Her eyes followed the room, the men warming, May speaking into the radio, Silas stomping snow from his boots, Owen standing near the door as if he had forgotten he was allowed to sit. The radio crackled again, but this time it was not May's unit. An older male voice came over the local volunteer band, rough with static and distance. "Snowline, this is Pike Fuel on open relay. Heard you brought 2 in. You folks need generator gas. You say so." Camille's hand stilled on Piper's paw. May looked toward the set. "Warren Pike," she said under her breath. Owen recognized the weight in her voice. Not trust, not distrust, history. Camille took the handset slowly. "Warren, this is Camille." A pause. Then the voice returned, quieter. "Been a long time hearing Snowline on the band." "Yes," Camille said, "it has." Another pause, filled with weather and things not said. "I'll keep relay open," Warren said. "Storm's chewing up half the valley. If anybody calls near your ridge, I'll pass it through." May watched Camille. Camille closed her eyes once. "Thank you, Warren." The radio clicked, but did not go dead. Somewhere down the mountain, a man who had been silent too long had placed one hand back on the rope. Owen looked around the lobby. Snowline was still legally closed, still damaged, still threatened by Daphne's warnings and Beale's lies. But 2 cold men were alive by its fire. A map once dismissed as memory had become a road. A widow had opened the register again, not for business but for the living. That mattered. And because it mattered, it would draw attention. By evening, the worst of the storm had moved lower across the valley, trapping the road, but easing around the inn. May caught fragments of radio traffic about blocked access and downed branches. Then, faintly, another voice bled through an open channel. Clyde Beale. After storm access clause still valid, property condition needs immediate inspection before county review. Daphne's voice followed, smoother but strained by static. Not tonight. Visibility remains poor. We proceed when road access permits. Documentation first. May reached for the knob and turned the volume down, but not before everyone heard enough. Silas set his mug on the counter with unusual care. Camille looked toward the stairs. Owen followed her gaze. Piper had risen again. No one had called her. No one had moved toward room 6. Still, the German shepherd limped to the foot of the staircase and lay down across the first step, placing her body between the lobby and the map room above. She was spent. Owen could see it in the tremor along her flank, in the way her head lowered heavily to her paws. But she did not leave the stair. Camille stood very still. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "She isn't guarding maps." Owen said nothing. Camille's eyes moved over the lobby. The rescued men, May at the radio, Silas beside the stove, the open register, the mugs, the blankets, the old chalkboard promising soup without charge. She's guarding the part of us that still knows what this place is for. Outside, snow drifted past the windows in bright, patient waves. Inside, the adults listened to the dog breathe. And for one fragile hour, while the pass lay buried and the valley waited for morning, Snowline Inn held together. not because fear had gone, because Piper had placed her tired body at the crossing of memory and duty, and nobody in that room could bear to step around her. By morning, the storm had weakened into a white, exhausted hush. Snowline Inn stood buried to the porch rails, its roof carrying a crown of snow so heavy it seemed the mountain had placed a hand there to test whether the old building would kneel. The road below had not fully reopened. Branches lay across the lower bend. Drifts swallowed half the signs. Every sound outside arrived softened, as if wrapped in wool. Inside, the inn had become something halfway between a shelter and a courtroom waiting to happen. The two rescued volunteers slept in chairs near the fire, wrapped in old wool blankets, their boots drying beside the stove. Silas Mercer sat at the front table with a mug of Camille's punishing coffee, staring at a copy of the forged repair sheet, like he hoped it might burst into flames out of shame. May Hollister stood near the radio, one hand resting on her notebook, listening to the county channel break apart and reassemble through static. Owen was fixing the latch on the rear service door, not because he had been asked, because broken things near frightened people bothered him. Camille moved through the room with quiet purpose, writing names, times, and conditions in the old guest register. Every line she filled seemed to make the inn less abandoned. A place did not become alive all at once. Sometimes it returned by ink, by soup, by a chair pulled closer to the fire. Piper lay by the stairs where she had stayed most of the night. She had allowed Camille to bandage one paw and Owen to check the stiff hind leg, but only after giving them both a look of tired royal disapproval. Now her head rested on her front paws, yet her amber eyes remained open. May looked toward the window. Vehicle coming. Owen stopped tightening the screw. Silas grunted. If it's the county, I'll be polite. If it's Beale, I'll be creative. May did not look at him. Be dull. Dull people survive depositions. A low engine pushed through the snow outside, then another. Through the frosted glass, dark shapes moved in the white lot. The first was Beale's white pickup, chain tires throwing slush. Behind it came the black SUV from Black Elk Vista. A third vehicle followed, larger, dark gray, with two men inside wearing matching winter jackets and the uncertain posture of people paid to look official without being official. Camille set down her pen. Owen could see the tremor in her hand. Not fear alone. Anger had entered it now, and anger made different music in the bones. May switched on the recorder clipped near her radio. "Everyone," she said, "use your grown-up words." Silas looked pained. The front door opened before Beale knocked. Owen had reached it first. Clyde Beale stood on the porch with snow on his shoulders and authority arranged badly across his face. Behind him, Daphne Vossler stepped carefully from the SUV, cream coat buttoned high, black gloves immaculate, her ash-blonde hair pinned as if storms were merely inconvenient lighting. The two Black Elk men stayed several steps back, holding folders against their coats. Beale held up a paper. "We're here under the access clause." Owen looked at the paper, then at Beale. "Good morning to you, too." Beale's eyes narrowed. "Move?" May came up beside Owen. "No." Daphne's voice arrived smooth as a blade pulled slowly from silk. "Ranger Hollister, this is unnecessary. The prior service agreement permits emergency post-storm access for safety review when immediate structural risk is present." May smiled without warmth. "Does it permit entry into an occupied temporary shelter under ranger supervision while rescue volunteers are recovering inside?" Daphne's expression barely shifted. "That is a convenient characterization." "It's an accurate one." Beale stepped forward. Owen did not move, but the space seemed to grow smaller around him. "Look," Beale said loudly, aiming his voice past them into the lobby. "If people are being housed here, that makes inspection more urgent." This building was closed for a reason. Camille walked to the door. No apron now, no mug in hand. She wore the same cream sweater and dark cardigan, but the brass key hung from a cord around her neck. It rested at her chest like a small, stubborn sun. "This is my property," she said. Beale gave her a practiced look of concern. "Camille, nobody is trying to take anything from you." Silas made a noise so rude it almost became a language. May lifted one finger without turning. "Silas?" Daphne stepped closer, addressing Camille directly. "Your property is being used in a way that may expose you to serious liability. My concern is that in the emotional aftermath of last night, you're allowing others to influence decisions that could harm you." Camille's face went pale, but she did not look away. "By others, you mean the people who brought 2 freezing men through my door?" "I mean people without legal responsibility for the outcome." Owen watched Daphne carefully. She had changed tactics, no longer offering rescue from burden, now warning Camille that the people standing with her could leave her alone with the consequences. It was a clever kind of cruelty because it dressed itself as protection. May held up her recorder. "For clarity, Ms. Vossler, are you directing your contractor to enter without consent?" Daphne's eyes flicked to the device. "No one is entering by force." Beale's jaw tightened. "You made it sound different on the radio," Silas said. Daphne looked at him. Silas tapped the forged paper on the table behind him. "Then again, paper has been doing a lot of pretending lately." Beale pointed at him. "You want to accuse me of something, do it properly." May said, "Gladly. We're documenting a questionable signature, inconsistent slope identification, altered access hardware, missing files, and now attempted overreach under a civil service clause during an active rescue shelter situation." "That's a pile of words," Beale snapped. "Yes," May replied, "but mine come with dates." One of the rescued volunteers stirred near the fire. The older man, still pale, but more awake now, pushed the blanket from his shoulders. "I can make a statement," he said. Everyone turned. He was in his late 30s or early 40s, broad-faced, beard damp from melted snow, eyes heavy with the aftershock of cold. Not a hero posing. Just a man who had nearly become a statistic and was angry about the paperwork trying to erase the place that had kept him breathing. "This inn took us in," he said. "Ranger Hollister got us out. Ms. Red had heat, blankets, soup, register, time of arrival. That's more organized than half the official warming stations I've seen." The younger volunteer nodded from his chair. "If this place hadn't opened, we'd still be sitting in that vehicle." Camille did not move, but Owen saw those words land in her like kindling catching flame. Beale laughed once, sharp. "2 grateful guys under blankets don't make a building safe." "No," May said, "but they do make your timing interesting." Beale turned toward Owen then, perhaps needing a less official target. "And you," he said. "What are you now? Some soldier without a war looking for a mountain to conquer?" The room tightened. Owen felt it happen in the others before he felt anything in himself. Camille's breath caught. Silas shifted. May's eyes cut briefly toward him. Piper lifted her head. The old answer rose in Owen first. Not words, movement, close the distance, remove the threat, end the noise. He took one step. Beale's expression changed, just enough. There was hope in it, ugly little hope, a hope that Owen would become the violent thing Beale needed him to be. Owen stopped. The pause was so complete, even the stove seemed to listen. Snowline did not need another broken door. It did not need a man proving strength by giving the enemy exactly what he wanted. It needed records, witnesses, maps, dates, signatures. It needed grown people to hold the line without turning into the storm outside. Owen's voice, when it came, was low. "I don't need you afraid of me. Beale's smile twitched. Owen looked at the papers in May's hand, the guest register on Camille's counter, Silas's forged signature, the two volunteers by the fire. "I need you afraid of the file." For once, Clyde Beale had no immediate answer. Then a horn sounded outside, not loud, not dramatic, just 2 short taps from the road. A pickup with Pike Fuel painted on the side pulled into the lot, chains clattering, engine coughing steam. Warren Pike climbed out slowly, one hand gripping a black ledger book inside his coat as if it weighed more than a Bible. Warren was 58, with a salt and pepper mustache, a gas station jacket patched at the elbow, and the red, wind-burned face of a man who had spent years outside pretending weather did not bother him. He moved carefully through the snow, not because he was frail, but because shame had made his body cautious. May opened the door wider. "Warren," he nodded once. "Brought generator fuel," he said. "And this." He held up the ledger. Daphne's eyes narrowed. Beale said, "This doesn't involve you." Warren looked at him, then at Camille. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's what I kept telling myself." He stepped inside. The smell of cold gasoline, wool, and old paper came with him. Warren placed the ledger on the table. Its black cover was worn soft at the edges. Inside, page after page held radio logs, dates, call signs, road closures, relay notes, stranded drivers, search team check-ins, warming requests, fuel drops, rescue support. Snowline appeared again and again. Snowline received 3 adults during whiteout. Snowline relayed lost hiker position to ranger station. Snowline provided shelter to county plow crew. Snowline kitchen open for search team. Lenora's name appeared in margins. Camille's, too. Warren kept his eyes on the ledger. "She pulled me out of Harlow Cut once," he said. "Lenora, before my grandson was born. I got turned around in a ground blizzard, thought the old marker was the road. She found me half a mile off, cussing at my own tailgate." A faint smile crossed his mouth and vanished. "When Black Elk started talking fuel contract, I told myself business was business. When folks said Snowline was finished, I didn't correct them hard enough." His voice roughened. "I let quiet pay me." Camille looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You're here now." Warren nodded, but did not forgive himself with it. "Too late is still better than never, I hope." The radio crackled again before anyone could answer. May stepped to it. A woman's voice came through, clipped and precise beneath static. "Hollister, this is Mallory at County Records. I have partial image review. Can you receive?" May keyed the mic. "Go ahead, Tessa." The voice belonged to someone who sounded like she had never lost a receipt in her life and considered that a moral position. 3 images embedded in Beale's structural packet do not match Snowline property file. Metadata references South Fork maintenance shed, inspection, year prior. Also, 1 snow load image appears cropped from a wider county training photo. May looked directly at Beale. The room went very still. Tessa Mallory continued, "I'm sending flagged copies when signal permits. County safety team is mobilizing once road access clears. Until then, no unsupervised contractor entry recommended." Daphne closed her eyes for 1 slow second. Not defeat, recalculation. Beale's face had gone the color of old brick. "That's bureaucratic nonsense," he said. May raised the radio slightly. "Would you like to repeat that for county records?" He did not. Then Piper tried to stand. The effort was small, almost unnoticed under the voices. Her front legs pushed first. Her injured hind leg slipped. Camille turned just in time to see the shepherd sway and fold gently against the floor near her boots. "Piper." The room forgot Beale. Camille dropped to her knees beside the dog, gathering the scarred head into her lap. Piper's eyes stayed open, embarrassed and tired. Owen crouched on the other side, fingers checking the dog's breathing, gums, pulse. Nothing immediate. Exhaustion. Pain. a body that had carried too much meaning for too many days. "She needs rest," Owen said. Camille's hand trembled over Piper's torn ear. For a moment, she was silent. Then she looked around the lobby. At May with the recorder, Silas with his forged signature, Warren with the ledger. The rescued volunteers by the fire. Owen kneeling beside the dog, Daphne near the door, clean and distant. Beale with snow melting on his boots and Lies losing heat. Camille spoke from the floor. "I closed this place because I was afraid living here meant losing Lenora every day." No one interrupted. "I told myself it was money, licenses, repairs, and some of that was true, but not all of it." Her voice shook but did not collapse. "I let Snowline become a room I wouldn't enter. Then other people found the locked door and tried to sell the whole house through it." Piper's head rested heavier in her lap. Camille bent over the dog, then looked up again. "I don't want this inn to be a tomb for the woman I loved. I want it to be what she made it for." Daphne's expression softened in the wrong way. Pity without surrender. "Camille." No, Camille's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "You don't get to make my grief sound like incompetence anymore." The silence after that was clean. May stopped the recorder, not because the moment was over, because it had become more than evidence. By late afternoon, the county safety team reached Snowline in 2 trucks with amber lights. Tessa Mallory arrived with them, stepping down from the passenger side, wearing a charcoal coat, sensible boots, and glasses that fogged the moment she entered the warm lobby. She was shorter than Owen expected, with a neat bob of dark hair threaded with silver and a folder clutched to her chest like a shield made of paper and accuracy. She took one look at the room and said, "I dislike surprises. This file is now full of them." May almost smiled. "Welcome to Snowline." Tessa set flagged copies on the table, mismatched photo codes, wrong property references, cropped images, altered sequence numbers. The county inspector, a tired man with a snow-crusted beard, reviewed May's notes and the shelter situation. He did not clear Snowline for normal operation. No one expected him to, but he formally suspended any unsupervised private contractor access pending review. Beale protested. Daphne did not. That was how Owen knew she understood the field had changed. She closed her folder with careful hands and looked at Camille. "Black Elk Vista will reassess its position." "I'm sure it will," Camille said. Daphne glanced once at Piper, sleeping now beneath Camille's coat. For the first time, her face showed something almost human, not remorse. Recognition, perhaps, that a place could be worth more than its development potential because people had begun saying so aloud. Then she left. Beale followed after 2 sharper exchanges with the inspector and one warning from May that his next sentence should consult an attorney before leaving his mouth. When the vehicles pulled away, Snowline did not erupt in cheers. It was too tired for that. Warren sat heavily near the door. Silas poured coffee and forgot to insult it. May leaned against the counter, eyes closed for exactly 3 seconds before reopening as if rest were a suspicious civilian habit. Tessa began organizing papers into piles with the grim satisfaction of a librarian preparing for war. Camille remained on the floor beside Piper. Owen stood near the front window, watching the tracks curve away through the snow. Snowline had not been saved. Not yet. Its permits were still tangled. Its roof still needed work. Its debts had not evaporated like breath on glass. Beale would fight. Black Elk Vista would retreat only as far as strategy required. But the inn was no longer one woman's grief surrounded by closed doors. It had witnesses now. It had records. It had people who had finally chosen not to let quiet pay them. Behind Owen, Camille whispered to Piper, "You can sleep now." The shepherd's tail moved once beneath the coat. Outside, winter held Silver Pass in its white hands. Inside, Snowline Inn held back. For the first time, it did not hold back alone. 3 weeks later, Snowline Inn opened its doors again. Not fully. Not the way Daphne Vossler's brochures would have imagined it, with glass balconies, champagne fireplaces, and guests who called the mountain authentic while someone else shoveled their path. Snowline reopened modestly, stubbornly, with half its rooms cleared for winter travelers and the other half set aside for ranger coordination, rescue overflow, and emergency shelter. It did not look reborn in the dramatic way stories like to claim. No ribbon stretched across the porch. No photographer caught Camille smiling beneath a banner. No crowd cheered while the villain watched from a dark car at the end of the road. Real repair was less theatrical. It smelled of sawdust, soup stock, wet boots, printer ink, and old coffee. Silas Mercer had been on the roof since sunrise, hammering shingles and muttering at gravity as if it were a subcontractor who had overcharged him. His brown canvas coat was dusted with frost, his yellow folding ruler stuck from one pocket like a flag of surrender that had forgotten how to surrender. Below him, Warren Pike carried fuel cans toward the generator shed, stopping every few steps to complain loudly that Snowline's stairs had multiplied since the last time he visited. His black radio ledger sat on the front desk now, copied, scanned, and treated with the respect usually reserved for legal documents or family Bibles. Warren pretended not to care. He also dusted it whenever he passed. Tessa Mallory had spent 2 long afternoons at the counter with a laptop, a scanner, and a stack of county forms, organizing permits until even May Hollister admitted the paperwork looked less like a barn collapse and more like civilization. Coming from May, this had the emotional force of a parade. The county had not granted Snowline a full commercial reopening yet. There were still repairs to finish, inspections to pass, and insurance knots to untangle. But the inn had received partial approval as a winter support station under ranger coordination. That meant the front room could remain stocked and heated during storms. The radio could stay active. The kitchen could serve rescue crews and stranded adults. Selected rooms could be used in emergencies. It was not everything. It was enough to begin. Camille stood in the lobby with a clipboard tucked against her chest, watching Silas's ladder tremble against the porch roof. "If he falls," she said, "I'm not naming anything after him." May, beside the radio, did not look up. "Good. It would encourage him." From the roof came Silas's voice. "I heard that." "You were meant to," May called. Owen Barrett stood near the front door, tightening the hinge on a coat rack that had survived 27 winters and apparently resented the 28th. He wore his olive drab combat shirt, camouflage sleeves pushed to his forearms, the dark bands around his upper arms nearly hidden by sawdust. His parka hung on a peg nearby. The old green toolbox sat open at his feet, each tool laid in careful order. He had come that morning to fix the coat rack. Then the kitchen window latch. Then the generator shed door. Then the loose stair tread near room 3. Small jobs collected around him the way snow collected on pine branches. Quietly, until there was weight. Piper lay beside the front desk, no longer guarding every doorway with the desperate vigilance of those first days. Her black and gold coat had regained a little shine. The scar along her right shoulder still showed where the fur grew thin. Her torn left ear would always give her the look of a queen who had survived a bar fight and considered herself superior for it. When she rose, her left hind leg still stiffened in the cold, but she rose more often now, mostly when Warren opened a biscuit tin. "Don't look at me like that," Warren told her, holding one biscuit above his head. "I am a respected radio operator and fuel supplier." Piper stared. Warren sighed and handed it over. Camille glanced at Owen. "She's training him nicely." Owen fitted the hinge pin into place. "He shows promise." Warren pointed at both of them. "I remember when this inn had manners." "No, you remember when Lenora let you believe you had dignity?" May said. Warren considered that. Fair? The room laughed softly, not loudly. Snowline's new laughter was still learning the shape of itself. But it came more easily now, moving through the lobby like heat from the stove. Beale's name appeared less often. That did not mean he had vanished. Clyde Beale was under investigation for forged documentation, misrepresented site photographs, and improper contractor access. His company had lost county approval pending review. People in Silver Pass did not shout his guilt across sidewalks because mountain towns rarely shouted what they could instead communicate through silence, refusal, and not returning calls. Daphne Vossler and Black Elk Vista had withdrawn their offer in a letter full of phrases like strategic reassessment and unfavorable public perception. Tessa had read it aloud in the dry voice of a funeral preacher who secretly disliked the deceased. Camille had folded the letter once and placed it in a file. She had not celebrated. Owen understood that. Winning one round did not rebuild a roof. It did not pay every bill. It did not return the dead or erase the nights when surrender had looked merciful. But something had changed. Snowline was no longer a closed building waiting to be purchased. It was a place people were willing to sign their names beside. That afternoon, Camille carried a small brass hook upstairs to room 6. Owen followed with a drill. The room had been cleaned, though not stripped of itself. The drafting table remained beneath the window. Lenora's colored pencils still sat in a jar, their points dulled from old use. The red scarf hung on the back of the chair, brushed free of dust, but left exactly where Piper had found it. Along the walls, Lenora's maps had been flattened, copied, and framed. Digital versions now lived on the county system, backed up in 3 places because Tessa had looked personally offended by the idea of one copy. Above the door, Camille had placed a simple wooden sign, Lenora Vale Map Room. She stared at it for a long time. Owen held the hook and waited. Camille took the brass key from her pocket. It had been cleaned, but not polished bright. Its age remained, dark in the grooves, smooth where hands had worn it. "I thought if I opened this room, I'd lose her again," Camille said. Owen looked at the maps, the scarf, the winter light touching the desk. "Did you?" "No." She smiled faintly. "That's the strange part." She got louder, but not in the way I feared. "How?" Camille turned the key over in her palm. Before, every memory asked why she wasn't here. Now some of them tell me what to do. Owen understood more than he wanted to. He fixed the hook beside the door. Camille hung the key there. It swung once, catching the pale light from the window. A small thing. A room key, yet the air changed around it. Not magic, not miracle. Something simpler and older. A burden becoming a marker. A locked thing becoming a sign. Downstairs, Piper barked once. Camille listened. "That means Warren opened the biscuits again," Owen said. "She's building a case." Camille laughed, and this time it did not break. That evening, after the workers left and May drove down to file the latest report, Snowline settled into its first quiet night as something alive again. The front room smelled of soup and wood smoke. The radio gave soft bursts of distant voices. Warren's relay check came through at 6, scratchy and dependable. Silas had left his hammer on the mantel and would deny it in the morning. Tessa's sticky notes still marked 3 folders behind the counter, bright little flags of bureaucratic victory. Owen had intended to leave before dark. He told himself that twice. The first time he was tightening the stove damper. The second, he was rewiring a loose lamp in the hallway. By the time he carried his tools toward the lobby, Camille stood at the foot of the stairs with a key in her hand. Not the brass key from room 6. A different one. Plain steel. Newer. A tag hung from it with a number written in Camille's hand. Owen looked at it. Camille held it out. "Room 3 has the east window," she said. "Good view of the pines. Bad radiator. It complains at 2 in the morning like a dying accordion. Owen did not take the key. I have a cabin. I know. I wasn't looking for a room. I know that too. Piper, who had been sleeping near the stove, opened one eye. Camille kept her hand extended. May says we need someone here nights through the heavy part of winter, generator checks, stove checks, radio backup, emergency maintenance, someone who doesn't panic when weather gets theatrical. Owen looked toward the window. Snow was falling again, lightly this time, soft enough to seem harmless. I'm not staff. No, Camille said. Staff would expect paychecks on time. That almost got him. She saw it and continued. Call it a winter arrangement, a room in exchange for night maintenance and rescue support when May needs extra hands. Owen's gaze moved to the key. Room 3, a number, a door, a place inside a building where other people made noise and needed things, dangerous in its way. Camille softened then, not with pity, but with the kind of honesty that did not ask permission. It's a good room for a man who likes pretending he doesn't need anyone. Owen looked at her. For a second, all his old answers rose. The cabin was enough. Solitude was cleaner. Need complicated everything. People turned rooms into obligations, and obligations turned into grief if fate was in a cruel mood. Then Piper stood, crossed the lobby, and pressed her muzzle against his hand. It was not dramatic. No music would swell for it. She simply put the weight of her scarred, stubborn head beneath his fingers and waited. Owen looked down at her. You too? Piper huffed. Camille said, She's very persuasive for someone who steals biscuits from elderly men. Owen closed his hand around the key. It surprised him how small it felt. It surprised him more that he did not want to give it back. I'll stay through winter, he said. Camille nodded as if that was all she had asked, though both of them knew it was not all that had been offered. Good, the radiator really is awful. That did make him smile. A real one, brief, uneven, unused, but real. Later, Owen stood on the front porch while Snowline glowed behind him. The windows spilled yellow light onto the snow. The sign above the porch no longer swung loose. Silas had fixed the chain and cursed the screws into obedience. From inside came the faint clatter of dishes, Camille moving in the kitchen, the low murmur of the radio, Piper's nails tapping across the floor as she conducted her final inspection of the evening. Down the valley, hidden behind trees and weather, Owen's cabin waited. The stove would be cold by now. The wood stacked, the tools in order, the silence exactly where he had left it. For years, that silence had felt like safety. Now, from the porch of Snowline Inn, it seemed smaller than he remembered. Not bad, not false, just no longer enough to be called home by itself. The door opened behind him. Camille's voice came through the warm gap. If you keep standing out there like a memorial statue, the soup's getting cold. Piper slipped past her and bumped Owen's hand with her nose. A command, a blessing, a shepherd doing herding work on a difficult middle-aged man. Owen looked once more toward the dark line of road leading up to his cabin. Then he turned back. Inside, room 3 waited with its bed radiator and east-facing window. The map room waited with Lenora's key beside the door. Camille waited beside the stove, holding 2 bowls and pretending that was no kind of invitation. Piper waited halfway across the threshold, impatient with the slow education of humans. Owen stepped in. The warmth closed around him. He was not healed. Healing was not a door a man walked through once and shut behind him. It was smaller than that, meaner sometimes. A series of choices made while grief still had a chair at the table. But he had accepted a key. He had accepted a room. He had accepted that perhaps a man could guard a place without becoming a weapon and keep a fire without being alone beside it. Upstairs in the Lenora Vale map room, beneath the framed roots and the old red scarf, Camille had written one new line on a small card and placed it under the first map. The safest roads do not always avoid the storm. Sometimes they lead us to the right people to cross it with. Outside, snow fell over Silver Pass, gentle as a hand laid on the shoulder of the mountain. Inside, Snowline Inn kept its light. And this time, Owen stayed to help it burn. Sometimes healing does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes as a tired dog at the door, an old key in the snow, or a room we finally have the courage to open again. Snowline Inn reminds us that grief does not have to become a locked house. With grace, patience, and the right people beside us, even the places that hurt can become places that shelter others. May God guide you through your own winter roads, and may He send you small lights when the way feels buried. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, hope, and quiet miracles.